I think in an ideal world, a queer person can feel safe and accepted and welcomed in every space they enter. There's no doubt, there's no fear. They just get to exist, and it is a comfortable, positive, joyous experience. My name's Elisabeth Hansen. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a product and learning experience designer. I identify as queer and bisexual. Any product that I'm working with is usually a digital one. So it's an app or a platform or a software. And my job is to oversee the whole process. And that involves understanding the user needs, technical needs and business needs, and making sure it all works together well. And my specific area of interest is education technology or ed tech. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, which is in the southwest of the US. And Arizona traditionally is a pretty conservative spot, but I found that I had little bubbles of more progressive places that I grew up. Both of my parents were educators, and I think that our community generally was a pretty supportive, progressive one. I'm not religious and was not religious, but we did go to a pretty liberal, non-denominational church where the youth group and the community there was really strong and accepting. Our ministers were like a lesbian couple at one stage, so that's the kind of space we were in. I had a pretty tight-knit group of friends. I was in Girl Scouts. I think overall my community was pretty supportive. My parents were good examples of how to be kind, compassionate, respectful people. I think sometime in early high school, so maybe 14, I had some realization that, I might be attracted to girls as well as boys. But it was an interesting space and time because I was dating a boy that I really wanted to be with, and that was a real thing, and was kind of in a girl power phase of all my friends are great. And so how do I differentiate those different things? But sometime around 14. In high school, my theater program was big and very queer friendly. What's interesting though, when I've sat back and thought about it, is that while I think there were lots of people exploring their queerness in that space, I didn't feel like I was actually a part of the community. I didn't feel like I counted because I was in a straight presenting relationship and I kind of wasn't sure, couldn't put words to everything myself. And in addition to that, there was a lot of, when people talked about bisexuality, it's a phase, we're experimenting. Everyone's a little bit bi, that was our favorite. And so I didn't want to talk about it, and I didn't want to take up space that didn't feel like mine. And so it was queer friendly, but in reflection, I didn't feel comfortable talking about my own queerness. Bisexuality is interesting, or multigender attraction is interesting and unique in that it is maybe one of the only orientations where you have to come out to your partner. I could be in a relationship with a cis man and I still would need to say, if I wanted to be open about my identity, hey, I am bisexual, I'm queer, to distinguish it from this is a straight presenting relationship. Or if I was in a relationship with a woman or a non-binary person or a gender fluid person, still to clarify. It's a very interesting space to be in. It took me a long time to be comfortable with the idea that I could be an out queer person in a relationship that did not look queer from the outside, even though inherently it's a queer relationship because I am one. One of the big things after I came out was unpacking why I didn't talk about it for all of that time when I knew that it was true. It was probably 10 years that maybe privately I would talk to close friends or I would, tell a partner or something like that, but I was not open about it. I wasn't out to my parents, who were incredibly supportive, but I just didn't do it. It helped me understand that it was always okay to talk about. It was always okay to stand in that regardless of what was happening around me. It was here. That was the most important. When I was younger, I understood STEM fields as this sort of uncreative space away from the things that I liked in reading and writing and theater. I knew that science, engineering, and math weren't in my wheelhouse, and I didn't understand what technology meant. And as I became a teacher and we were integrating tech into our teaching, it was clunky for a little bit. And then maybe 10 years ago, so early 20s, I was in a classroom that was this very high-tech classroom that really made the learning better. I made that connection of, I can see where tech makes this better. From a formal education perspective, I did a bachelor's in secondary education, a master's in international education, and worked. That's when I went abroad. I moved to Germany and was teaching business English and intercultural competency skills. Working abroad gave me the opportunity to not only understand other cultures, but also how to help them understand one another. And I learned a lot about my own. There was really kind of confronting but important understandings I had when I was outside of the fishbowl of my own culture. And it gave me a really big appreciation for the vast array of ways that people think and the way that they work and the way that what their values look like, what their priorities look like, how they navigate the world. And I think having had practice in navigating that with other people as a professional, I've just brought that into every job that I have. It's helped me kind of hone how I approach new situations with an open mind. And that's important anywhere you go. I was talking to more people in the tech space and kind of by accident found user experience or UX design courses. I Googled the wrong thing and it popped up. When I saw that there was an opportunity to connect tech and the meaningful work that I wanted to do, that I could put my skills into making products more accessible and more inclusive and make education better, it clicked. And I decided then to get a certificate. I did a certificate program in user experience design. In March 2022, I fell into UX design, the rabbit hole online, and decided to sign up for a boot camp. So these boot camps are sort of a 6-month to 10-month commitment, and it's meant to sort of power you through faster than a formal degree program. And so I hadn't been in school for 8 years or something like that. And it was a big learning curve because I didn't have any of the visual design piece of it, but I did have all of the people part of it from lots of years of education and program management. I learned a lot about visual design. I started completing projects. I had a mentor through this program, and I had a big community of new designers who were learning all the same things I was. It was an intense program. It was a steep learning curve. But when I got to the end of it, I had a portfolio of a mix of projects. That was what I used to graduate, and that's what you use when you start applying for work. So my mentor in that program helped me in some part with acquiring the new skill set. It's brand new. I've never done visual design before, and this mentor is an experienced designer in the field. So some of it was just skill building, but another part of it was the guidance as someone who has shifted careers at 30 and someone who is new in a field and is navigating doubt and a tricky market and wondering, how can I take all my previous skills and put this here? Should I have done it? All of that. So it was emotional support as well as technical support. And I do also want to note that he was very supportive of making sure I included any work I did in the queer community in the work that I was doing in my course. He said, this is important, and I can tell it's important to you. So keep it in. Don't leave it out to make things feel more palatable. Yeah. Unfortunately, tech took a big hit at the end of 2022 and into this year. Layoffs have been really substantial. So where I have taken that learning and that new skill set has been in a lot of pro bono projects and freelance projects, and often working with small businesses, working with nonprofits, and helping them make their platforms more accessible. One of the big things in product design is the focus on making sure we're solving for the right problem. And so a lot of that involves talking to the people who are experiencing the problem. And that requires asking really good questions. And that comes from education. How do you ask questions to make sure you understand what people need? Because sometimes they can't articulate it right off the bat. You have to dig and you have to take the information they give you and find where it connects with what you're trying to do. And it's this very intricate process. And in addition to that, building rapport with people is really important because they feel that they can trust you and they feel that you're there to help them and you're there with them in mind. I think that there's a big shift into including queer voices in tech space and UX and in product design. I have found that the UX community is uniquely supportive in that a lot of people have shifted into this field from other fields, but also I think that there are a lot of initiatives around not only elevating queer voices in tech, but also promoting and boosting queer initiatives and queer projects. And so Out in Tech is its own group that has mentoring and projects and job boards. Tech Fleet has pro bono LGBTQ plus based projects and clients that focus on the needs of queer people. UX Untamed podcast had a whole bunch of queer guests. Ladies That UX Seattle had a panel for building community in UX. It's really impressive, I think, how wide that support goes. I was a content writer for Out for Australia, and what we did in that was work towards elevating queer expertise as well as celebrate LGBTQIA plus awareness days. So we would interview folks from the community and have them speak to either their specific experiences or topics that were trending in the news and in the media. And we did this so that we could reach a broader community with information, connect people to thought leaders, to experts, and different things like that. Out for Australia's overall mission was really impactful and meaningful in that they worked towards building networks and mentorship opportunities for young queer people who were looking to enter the workforce. They wanted them to be able to have the support and guidance of people with similar lived experience as them. And it was a really great program to be a part of. I have found that I've been really warmly welcomed in the community. I've not experienced pushback. And I think that some of that is because I pivoted, and that pivot came with a big community of other people trying to find their way. There is conversation about having queer people in product design and in learning experience design, because you want folks who have that lived experience creating things for the wider community. You want that perspective in the planning meetings and in the design rooms and in testing and in research. I was not out for much of my professional life for very similar reasons to why I wasn't out in communities, because I think I didn't feel like it counted. I think that it felt extra and that it felt like I wasn't adding anything to the conversation. When I think back to the places where I didn't talk about it, I think I would have been relatively warmly received, but I was too afraid to risk it. I didn't want to risk it. 4 years ago was the first time I came out at work, and it was because it was the first time I was in a pride parade, and I wanted to say at the staff meeting, like, I'm going to be on TV, look for me. But then the question came, oh, which float? And the float was identity specific. We use the term bi plus, which includes any multi-gender attracted orientation, so pansexual, omnisexual, polysexual, queer. And so I had to tell them, oh, I'm in the bi float. And it was very warmly welcomed. And I think that people were surprised that I didn't tell them. Like, I'd gone all this time and not mentioned anything about it. And they were very intentional and kind of pointed in their support, which was the warmest welcome I could have from any of that. And since that time, I have been more open as I've done more work in the queer community. I have been more open at work, nervous maybe still, but open, and haven't received too much pushback. So, I have loved every opportunity I've had to help people better understand one another and to more deeply build community and connection. I think it's been this really wonderful opportunity to get to talk to people about what do you need and what can I do with my expertise to meet those needs. And sometimes that's been in a product or a lesson or something I could provide in a classroom, but sometimes it's just been to facilitate an opportunity to feel seen and heard. And whatever my title is, and as my titles may change over time, I always hope that that's at the core of my work. I'd really like to go the leadership route. I think it would be a great opportunity to continue to build these spaces where people feel seen and heard and valued. And sometimes that's in the product that you distribute to consumers. Sounds kind of cold, but the product you create for users, but then also as a leader to create spaces for the people you're working with, for your colleagues, for your teams, where they feel that they can grow and thrive and be themselves in the space that they're working. And to be a queer person at the head of that feels important and feels like a great opportunity. So that's what I hope for myself. And from a personal space, to just keep showing up honestly. I think there are resource barriers and education barriers, especially at school level, for young people who want to get into STEAM fields. Sometimes schools just don't have the resources, especially if you're in more marginalized communities, just don't have the money, the resources to help students go in that direction. With career changing, I think there's a bit of a challenge around understanding what's the right way to go about making that switch. Do you invest in a boot camp that will tell you that you'll get a job within 6 months, and then the market falls apart, and then what? And have you really learned the skills that you actually need? And so I think that those barriers, especially in career pivoting, are also financial, because boot camps are expensive, and how much of getting hired is also who you know. And building those networks takes time. So a lot of the barriers, I think a lot exist financially for marginalized communities, and also just access to information. Where can I find, where do I go? How do I talk to people who are involved, who could give me guidance on whether or not this is a good fit for me? Those things are necessary to get into the field, and I think they're limited in marginalized spaces. When we're looking at accessibility and inclusivity in a product, there's a really important distinction between anyone can use our product and we have made this product with you in mind. That's a very important distinction between the two. And so thinking about that, representation is so important and it's so powerful. And the more diversity we have in product design spaces and in ed tech spaces means that these products will reach more people and empower more people. And what's better than that? I met someone in the community who is a business equity strategist, and her job is to speak with companies who are looking to make their organization more equitable. And I think from what I've learned from her, you really have to look in like the guts of the work you do, in your hiring practices, in your employee resource opportunities and things like that, to make sure that you are meeting the needs, the real needs of the people that work for you. And in order to do that, I think you got to talk to the people and you got to take that feedback seriously. I think you need to engage professionals who know how to implement those changes and not kind of band-aid it with a DEI day and, one training and now we've done it. I think sometimes it's a system overhaul, and it would just look like there are equal opportunities and sometimes intentional opportunities to bring in diverse talent to spaces that have not had it before, and then to really take what they have to say on board and integrate that into your work. In product design, all of that applies. You need to make sure that the people you bring in can offer information and perspectives and insights that your previous iterations of teams could not, and then celebrate it, value it, and keep it going, make it sustainable. As a learning experience designer, I was responsible for redesigning the virtual orientation program, or like the onboarding for new starters. We were in COVID, we were in lockdown, everything was virtual. This organization was religiously affiliated, and it was Christian and following the teachings of Jesus. And what we were finding is that new starters heard that in their virtual orientation, which was co-facilitated by chaplains, and they wondered, am I going to be welcome here? If I am queer, if I don't follow this religion, is this going to be a safe place for me to work? And so my project was to redesign how we spoke about that piece of inclusion in the workplace, talk to the chaplains about the concern that the staff were having, and we changed it and we switched up to talk about what we meant by inclusion to specifically address the LGBTQIA+ population. And the feedback we received once we implemented those changes was so positive people saying thank you for including that because I was afraid I was going to need to quit. I appreciate that they took that on board, especially from a religiously kind of based organization. I have felt that my perspective, my experience is valued. And I also want to caveat that I have a lot of privilege in the queer community as a white, able-bodied, cisgendered femme person. And so, yes, I think that my perspectives have been valued. And I think that I want to be understanding, though, of the fact that sometimes that's also because I have a lot of privilege. I would tell my younger self, there is nothing about who you are that isn't worth talking about, and that you don't have to have things figured out to be allowed to take up space, to merit a spot in the queer community, that there's always an opportunity and always someone who would be open to listening to you talk about your fears, the challenges, your questions, but every single one of those things is worth talking about. I would tell young queer people who are interested in STEAM careers that there are people in STEAM currently who would love to have you. There are people who will help you. There are people with resources who value your perspectives and your interest. Having these conversations, reaching out to people, offers really great opportunities to find resources you might not otherwise look for online. But at the base of it, you are welcome here, and that we believe that you can be here from whatever starting point you're at. There is space for you, and we're excited to have you.